Hello, IB12s. Here we are with your final text of the year. Super sorry that we didn't get to do this one in class together because I think our discussions would have been so unbelievable. For our final text of the year, we are bringing you the South Korean film Parasite. And this South Korean film Parasite is just released. It's amazing. I want to do a special shout out to Abhay, who did his FOA on this film. So he is somebody who has a deep prior knowledge, and I just, like I said, really appreciate the kind of class where you guys bring texts to the table that are worthy of deep and thorough discussion. So again, thank you, class of 2020, for being awesome. Again, we're going to be watching Parasite, and what you see on this first slide is on the left, I believe, that's the South Korean poster, and then you see a variety of different global posters. The film Parasite has resonated profoundly, both before the pandemic, and then I would argue even more so since the pandemic and our isolation has started, as it critiques the polarization of wealth. Bong Joon-ho, and I think I'm saying his name right, but again, part of what we'll appreciate here is that situated as a non-Korean speaking American, one of the things I'm hoping for is for my students to help out with pronunciation. But our author brings us a deeply important narrative of the polarization of wealth in society. This is ironically a dark murder comedy about wealth. What you are going to appreciate next is that I have some language here for you so that you can see what the Korean originally looks like. RR, from my research, has shown me that it is the way that we write out Korean using English letters. So I'd love to be corrected if that's not true. The film citation that you see there is going to be appropriate for citing this film if you ever write about it. Just know that this premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. It is called a pitch black modern fairy tale, and so I think that it is very, very fascinating to consider what a fairy tale might be. Screenplay writing credits, again, go to the director and another writer. I really think this poster is profound because, again, this film is about wealth, but it uses symbolism in a variety of different, deeply important ways in order to convey some truths. From Her in the Sea of Stories, we learned the purpose of telling stories that aren't true, because ironically, those stories can absolutely speak truth about the societies that we have and get us to know truths in our heart. So after you watch the film, you may wish to come back and take a look at this picture. It becomes more interesting.
핸드폰도 다 끊기고 와이파이도 다 끊기고.
야, 김기택.
어떻게 생각하셔?
아버지, 저는 이게 위조나 범죄라고 생각하지 않아요. 저 내년에 이 대학 꼭 갈 거거든요.
그건 엄연한 범죄입니다.
아들아, 너는 계획이 다 있구나.
과연 그럴까요? 저는 백수 가족의 장남 기우가 고액 과외 면접을 갑니다.
참으로 시의적절하다.
2019년 봉준호 감독의 새로운 가족 희비극. 기생충.
So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, this, as you can probably tell, this movie right away is both beautiful and compelling for those of us that like film. So the other reason that I wanted to bring this to the table, aside from the fact that my wonderful class brought this to my attention, is the fact that this film actually was brought to the attention of the entire world. I think that many of us are aware of the fact that groups like the Oscars previously were gatekeepers of a variety of different things. And I think that many of you are aware of the hashtag Oscars So White as a very, very appropriate critique of the fact that the winners of the Oscars have been largely Caucasian in a move we can really only call racist. But fortunately, we are now appreciating that at this point we are seeing that some films are starting to come to light and be awarded for the work that they have. Um, so ultimately, this is the first non-English language film to win an Academy Award for Best Picture. And what I think that I want you to appreciate is that, to have a film not in English win shows that the supremacy of the English language, the sun, not ever setting on the British Empire, all of that sort of legacy ultimately is beginning to shift. And there is so much more to go. But look at these wonderful people on a wonderful day for them. The other thing to appreciate, right, is not only did it win Best Picture, but it actually won 4 Oscars, another 255 wins internationally, and 234 other nominations. What you can see on the left is their SAG Award, and what you see on the right is their BAFTA. There are, of course, many, many, many others, but those are the ones, like I said, that traditionally have been attended to by the people in my class, so there we are. I will say this, I think it's very entertaining that our director here still thinks that his influence is nowhere near that of BTS. I want to be clear, it's not about Western acceptance of South Korean art. That's not remotely what I'm trying to highlight here, but I think that the fact that we now see South Korean artists like BTS and like the director of Parasite having such a broad audience in the United States and in Europe, right, it speaks to the dominant influence of South Korean culture, and I think that that's an exciting shift. We see that BTS has like almost as much success as the Beatles in terms of being the first act to register 3 #1 spots on a Billboard album chart. I don't know. It's fascinating. Okay, continuing on, friends. We are going to go ahead and we're going to look at some by the numbers here. So think of this as just a bit of a Harper's Index, if you will. Release date, 21st of May, 2019. Our running time is 132 minutes. So like we said, we're going to ask you, Ms. Bose and I, to do your essential learning time for this week about this particular film. So you have the whole week this week, that first week in June, to watch this film. The original budget was 20.5 billion. Okay, but that's in Korean. So ultimately, we've got US 11.4 million. It was incredibly good moneymaker. 266 million is sort of the amount of money that we say that they earned for this film. But ultimately, with its broad release, that's just going to continue. That statistic is old and low. Okay, now that you've had a chance to kind of get an introduction to the film and the way that I brought the film to the table here based on the recommendations of my class and kind of the role of this film in being an ambassador for some who were previously unaware of South Korean culture and the ways that we see some similar conflicts. So questions that I'd like you to discuss. As you know, Ms. Bose and I are going to ask you guys to sign up for a discussion group on the 8th or the 9th, okay? And we'll discuss for, 30 or 45 minutes the film in a small group, and that'll be what we'll have as your final exam. I'm not going to put that final exam in as 10% of your grade because that would kind of negate the value of all the hard work you did before March, but I will put it in as a culminating score. So this will have the ability to increase your grade if you're somebody who's looking to make your grade higher. Okay, so here's a bunch of different questions that we might want to talk about when we come together for our discussion. Again, nothing's going to be collected, but before you watch the film, I just wanted you to have these so that you'd have a sense of what's going on. So first and foremost, who's the parasite? Is it the wealthy family? Is it the not wealthy family? Is it the insidious social systems that put them obliviously or not obliviously into the roles that they're in? And what lines within the text help you feel that this parasite, this particular image, related to one group or another? The second thing that I wanted us to consider is the way that this particular film relates to Ursula Le Guin's short story. You may or may not remember that we began the year with The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and our essential question for that story is like, who suffers so you can be happy? We were considering our own lives at the beginning of senior year. In this particular case, though, in Parasite, who suffers so you can be happy? Are you even aware of them? Are you aware of their suffering? I think that that's a really important and interesting question to consider. So I reposted the PowerPoint and the short story of The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas. It's a great opportunity for some collegiate level synthesis if you'd like to go ahead and do some comparing and contrasting of those two. Another thing I was thinking is that, it's I don't want to like be ethnocentric and call this film Shakespearean, but I think, this film could be beautifully divided into some very dramatic acts, and maybe the actual screenplay already is. Again, I've only perceived this as a visual text. If we looked at the actual script, that might give us a different layer here. But if you were to divide this film into several acts, right, and if you were going to justify the name you gave each act, what would you call each part of this film? Because I don't know, it's kind of interesting the way it's structured. Um, Another question. In the film's violent final scene, what literal and metaphorical deaths occur, and what's the significance of each? We also want to consider that after sort of the highly climactic final scene, the director has a reporter note that this is a highly unusual case in South Korea. And my ears perked up. And so certainly the details of this case would be unusual. But to what extent is this narrative of wealth polarization usual or unusual? And to what extent is it, and badly, do you think, for people in a variety of different cultures? A fourth big overall question for this film I'd like you guys to consider is, how did the end of the film depict the cyclical nature of the socioeconomic problems sort of portrayed within this culture? At the very end of the film, I get a sense that this is going to continue. And I think our author uses imagery to show that that is going to continue on. So what do you think that's all about? Irony is all over the place. This is a satire. This is a dark comedy, right? So there's irony everywhere. So just kind of be looking for that which is opposite. I think a Marxist critique is kind of important. And with a Marxist critique, the socioeconomic critique, right, is just looking at the distribution of wealth and the historical structures that manifest the distribution of wealth. But a literary Marxist critique asks you to consider the role of creative fiction in identifying sociological issues. So part of a literary Marxist critique of this film would be considering, like, where does this fiction come from, right? And why is this fiction identifying this polarization of wealth or this distribution of wealth? Going back to just legit classic like imagery thoughts, right? Analyze the role of one of these aspects of imagery in the film. Food imagery. Ooh, you could compare and contrast with Food and the Reluctant Fundamentalist, but you don't have to. There's the symbolism of the wealth rock, which I think is interesting. There's flood imagery, which also obviously is important. Morse code, Americana, okay? Or another motif that you noticed. Considering marriage in Parasite is interesting. There's three marriages. There's sort of the first marriage that you meet, the one, the not so wealthy, not wealthy at all one. Then there's the wealthy marriage, but then there's also the marriage that's divided, right? By, quite frankly, the house on some level. So consider those three marriages. How are they similar to or different from other marriages that we've learned about, like Wolfe's Ramses or Ibsen's Torvald and Nora, or, Romeo and Juliet, maybe a little bit of star-crossed love on some level here. The Macbeths. So role of marriage in this film as well. Now, I think one thing that is most important here, and one of the things that I'm hoping from, because again, I think being a lifelong learner and really listening is important. I really want to listen to those of you with more of a personal knowledge of South Korean culture, language, symbols, etc. So first and foremost, if I or another student in my class is mispronouncing something, I really want you to correct us like each and every time, if you feel like you have the energy to do that. If not, I totally get it. You don't have to represent all Koreans. But if you have the energy to help us out, if we're embarrassing ourselves with pronunciation, that'd be great. Your thoughts on the translation. I would love, as someone who's a monoglot, someone who only speaks one language, to know all the different thoughts that you have on the subtitles. I'm curious the way that South Korean traditional family roles are varied based on class. I think just a connection, we saw this if you read The Handmaid's Tale, where the family roles are really defined in the upper class, whereas there's more of a utilitarian, I don't know, pluralism, right, in the familial roles of individuals in sort of the lower class. So what's going on in Korea today? The broader symbolism of the wealth rock. I'm curious about laws about military service in South Korea. I'm curious about the university entrance exam system. I'm curious if it's more of like a gatekeeper or a way to match people with opportunity, or a way to match like aptitude with potential. So what's that situation? I'm more familiar with university entrance exam systems in China and Singapore, just because I've had more students in those places. Also, just in general, as a lifelong American, I am totally sure that I have blind spots when watching this film. And one of my favorite things to learn from my students is what I might have missed. So, what imagery might I have missed? What allusions and cultural references are important to those situated as insiders in South Korean culture? I know it takes energy to share as an insider with an outsider what that is, but I really appreciate allies. So, thanks for helping me out. Um, on a very much a lighter note, I have curious questions about matching clothing. When I was in Bora Bora, at the resort that I stayed at, there were a variety of different honeymooning couples from Korea, lovely people, and a variety of them dressed the whole week in matching outfits. And I also noticed that the Korean couple, the wealthy Korean couple, wore matching pajamas in this film. And so I'm curious, matching clothing. It's interesting. Because, in our culture, we only do it for young twins. Anywho, I'd love to be enlightened. Thank you, my friends. I really appreciate your ability to share your lived experiences with me. They have value. Thanks a lot. Another sort of piece is you might be an expert because you might have taken IB film and you might be able to speak to the more technical aspects of this film. So if you had a year of or most of a year of working with Bacon, and if you know more about cinematography and behind the scenes and lighting and camera action, please speak up. Again, I would love to learn from you as well. I always really appreciate when I show the film The Pianist to my 10th graders. I always really appreciate when they talk to me about the music. So if you know anything about architecture, set design, food, music, etc., please go ahead and share in discussion what you know as well. Another thought that I'd like to have, guys, before we move on to our final slide, is I'd love to hear about when you've had a personal experience realizing something about wealth or class or race that had previously been a blind spot for you. How did you feel, and what did you do with that knowledge? For me personally, I was talked about this with some of my book club groups, but I was watching an architectural digest video where Kerry Washington, I'm a big fan of her, both in Scandal, Little Fires Everywhere, and basically everything she's done. But Kerry Washington was taking me on a tour of her New York City apartment. I enjoy a good New York City apartment tour. And she, in her video, mentioned that the term master bedroom was reminiscent of slavery for people situated as people who are vulnerable in that situation. Master bedroom it harkens the master's bedroom. It's a racist slavery related term. So I will be calling it the main bedroom in my house from this time, and appreciating that blind spot makes me feel that I've been embarrassed and that I didn't realize the way that slavery language had infiltrated the way that I talk about my home. So ultimately, that is my personal experience, and I hope that, if it's possible that you have had a personal experience in realizing something about wealth or class, that might be something that you might be interested in sharing. What have you done with that knowledge? Well, I'm trying to share it with my students. I think it's an easy way that we can not only understand blind spots, but also change something that was previously reminiscing positively about slavery. And we can quickly make that shift, hopefully, to be better people. Last but not least, guys, our final sort of set of questions that I want to ask is, aside from this just being a beautiful film, an artistic film, just kind of really an unbelievable work of art, why do you think this film resonated so profoundly in 2019 and the pre-pandemic world of 2020? We've had this before and after moment. This won an Oscar, and then we all went into those bubbles, those pandemic isolated bubbles. I think one of the important things for people on the privileged side, or really for everyone to remember, is, I think it's easy for people on the privileged side to forget that we're not all in the same boat. We are in the same viral storm. It's a global storm, but we are not in the same boats. So now that we're sheltering in pandemic isolated bubbles, to what extent does this film gain more significance? Now that there really is a virus, right, that's pushing us into our homes and into our places. What have you learned about your wealth and your privilege, or the lack thereof? Because we want to remember that not everybody in our community experiences the same socioeconomic class. So Seniors, my friends, thank you for listening to this brief introduction to the film. You know how I do like to do a little intro lecture. You are going to be free to discuss any aspects of the film that you would like to discuss when we come to the 8th and the 9th of our discussion. So I encourage you later on this week, once you've watched the film, on Thursday or Friday, we'll have the sign-up sheet so that you can sign up for your discussion groups. And you will also find directions for accessing this film for free. Doran has a whole system. So right above this video, you should find beneath this video on my website, you should find the directions to access the film using Amazon and a Gmail account, so you don't have to pay. This film is on Hulu, though, so if you already have it on Hulu, you're welcome to go ahead and watch it there, but we did get something organized for you so that you don't have to pay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again. Please don't hesitate to schedule a Zoom if you have any questions about this introduction, or if you have any thoughts about this introduction, or any ideas that you'd like to share just with me and not necessarily with a larger group. Bose and I would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you all, and we look forward to our final discussion.